Have you ever replayed a moment in your head, again and again, long after everyone else has moved on? Maybe someone disrespected you, betrayed your trust, said something that stayed under your skin like a splinter you couldn't remove. And even years later, it still feels fresh. Not loud, not explosive, just quietly alive. That's the psychology of a grudge, and it runs much deeper than people think. Holding a grudge is not just about anger. It's about memory, identity, and emotional survival. When something painful happens, your brain doesn't just record the event. It records the meaning. According to cognitive psychologist Aaron Beck, our minds create interpretations that shape how we see the world. So when someone hurts you, your brain doesn't just say, "This happened." It says, "This is what it means about me, about them, about relationships." And if that meaning feels threatening, your mind holds on to it, not because it wants to suffer, but because it thinks it's protecting you. People who hold grudges for years often have something deeper going on beneath the surface. Unprocessed emotional pain. It's not just the event that lingers. It's the feeling that was never fully felt. Think about it. In the moment someone hurts you, you might not have the space to process it. Maybe you suppress it. Maybe you tell yourself it's not a big deal. Maybe you avoid confrontation. But your nervous system doesn't forget. According to Dan Siegel's work on interpersonal neurobiology, experiences that are not fully processed remain unintegrated in the brain. They stay active, like open tabs you never closed, and every time something reminds you of that experience, the same emotional charge returns. This is why grudges feel so alive, because in a way, they are. Another layer to this is attachment. Attachment theory suggests that our early relationships shape how we respond to emotional pain. If you grew up in an environment where your feelings weren't validated, or where trust was inconsistent, your brain becomes more sensitive to betrayal. Even small hurts can feel like deep violations. Not because you're overreacting, but because your system is wired to detect emotional danger. So when someone breaks your trust, your brain marks it as important. Very important. And it refuses to let go easily, because letting go feels like losing control. There's also something called cognitive dissonance, introduced by Leon Festinger. This happens when reality conflicts with your beliefs. For example, if you believe someone is good, and they hurt you, your mind struggles to reconcile that. So instead of adjusting the belief, it sometimes holds on to the grudge, because the grudge helps maintain a sense of certainty. They wronged me. It wasn't okay. And in a strange way, that certainty feels stabilizing, even if it's painful. Now here's where it gets even more complex. Grudges are often tied to identity. Over time, the story becomes part of who you are. You're not just someone who was hurt. You're someone who remembers, someone who doesn't forget, someone who holds people accountable. And while that can feel like strength, it can also become a quiet prison. Because if you let go of the grudge, you might feel like you're letting go of a part of yourself. Carl Jung once said, "What you resist persists." And grudges are a perfect example of that. The more you mentally fight the memory, the more it anchors itself inside you. Let's bring this into real life. Imagine someone who was betrayed by a close friend years ago. On the surface, they've moved on. They have new relationships, new routines. But whenever they hear that friend's name, or see something that reminds them of that time, there's a subtle shift. Their body tightens. Their thoughts become sharper. Their mood changes. That's not just memory. That's the nervous system reacting, because the experience was never fully resolved. Or think about someone who was humiliated publicly. Years later, they might still avoid situations where they could be judged, not because they're weak, but because their brain is trying to prevent that same pain from happening again. Grudges are not just about the past. They shape the future. They influence how you trust, how you connect, how safe you feel around others. But here's the part most people don't realize. Holding a grudge doesn't actually protect you. It just keeps you emotionally connected to the pain. It's like holding onto a burning coal, hoping it reminds you not to get burned again. But all it really does is keep your hand in the fire. Over time, this takes a toll. Emotionally, it creates chronic tension. Mentally, it reinforces negative thought patterns. Physically, it keeps your stress response activated. Your body doesn't know the difference between a real threat and a remembered one. So every time you revisit the grudge, your system reacts as if it's happening again. And slowly, this becomes your baseline. not peace, but guardedness. So how do you shift this? Not by forcing forgiveness, not by pretending it didn't matter, but by understanding what the grudge is trying to do for you. Every grudge has a purpose. It might be protecting you from being hurt again. It might be holding on to a sense of justice. It might be trying to make sense of something that felt unfair. When you see that, the grudge stops being your enemy. It becomes a signal, a message, and instead of pushing it away, you can start to process it. This is where awareness comes in. When you revisit the memory, instead of getting lost in the story, focus on the feeling. Where do you feel it in your body? What emotion is underneath the anger? Often, it's not just anger. It's sadness, rejection, shame. And when those emotions are finally felt, without resistance, they begin to move. This is what Carl Rogers meant when he said that when we fully accept our experience, change naturally follows. Letting go of a grudge doesn't mean what happened was okay. It means you're no longer letting it control your internal state. It means you're choosing peace over prolonged pain. And that's not weakness, that's mastery. Because the real power is not in remembering everything. It's in deciding what you carry forward. So if you've been holding on to something for years, maybe the question isn't, why can't I let this go? Maybe the question is, what part of me is still trying to be heard? Because once that part feels seen, the grip starts to loosen, and what felt permanent begins to fade. If this video connected with you, comment which part felt most true. And if you enjoy deep psychology content like this, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more videos about human behavior, emotions, relationships, self-awareness, and the hidden patterns of the mind. See you in the next one.